My name is Margaret. I'm 65 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, I've been a quiet woman who believed in kindness and family. I raised my children with patience, worked two jobs after my husband passed, and carried myself with dignity even when the world turned its back on me. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that came from the one person I thought I could trust the most, my grandson. The moment that still plays in my head like a broken record happened one late afternoon. I walked into my bedroom expecting peace, but instead found my grandson, Daniel, digging through my dresser drawers like a thief in the night. My heart nearly stopped when I saw what he held in his hands, my late husband's war medals, the ones he had kept safe since the 1940s. They weren't just pieces of metal. They were his pride, his history, and my last connection to the man I loved with all my heart. Daniel, I shouted, my voice trembling. What on earth are you doing with those? He looked at me without a drop of shame. His eyes, once soft and sweet when he was a little boy, were now sharp and cold. He gave me a grin that twisted my stomach. Relax, Grandma, he said, chuckling. They're just medals. Nobody cares about this old junk. Besides, you'll be dead soon anyway. What use are they to you? His words cut through me like glass. I gasped, clutching my chest, not sure which hurt worse, the fact that he was stealing from me or the cruelty in his voice. My husband had fought, bled, and nearly died for those medals. And now his own grandson was ready to pawn them off for a few dollars. I begged him to stop, but he brushed past me, laughing, and slammed the door behind him. 3 days later, a sharp knock echoed through Daniel's apartment. When he opened the door, two stern-looking FBI agents stood in the hallway, flashing their badges. Daniel Carter, one of them asked. He froze in the doorway, his smirk fading as the agents exchanged a quick look. What Daniel didn't know, and what I had never told anyone, was that those medals weren't just decorations. Inside them were tiny microfilms hidden decades ago, carrying secrets worth millions. And that was the moment everything changed. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. Life had always been a delicate balance of love and loss for me. My husband, Richard, was the kind of man who carried storms in his eyes but warmth in his hands. He had fought in World War II, and though he rarely spoke of what he saw, the war followed him home in quiet ways, nightmares that made him wake up shouting, or the way he paused whenever fireworks cracked in the summer sky. But the medals, oh, those medals were sacred. He kept them in a small wooden box lined with velvet, polishing them every year on Veterans Day. I never asked him why he guarded them so fiercely, but I respected his silence. After he passed away 15 years ago, I promised him, even at his grave, that I would never let them out of my sight. They were his legacy and by extension mine. For years, they stayed safe in my bedroom drawer. I lived a modest life in a quiet town, baking pies for church gatherings, tending to my garden, and reading mystery novels late into the night. My children had grown and drifted into their own worlds, but Daniel, sweet little Daniel, was the one who stayed in touch the most. Or so I thought. He was only 5 when Richard died, too young to remember the stories, too young to understand the sacrifices. I spoiled him more than I should have. Every time he asked for money for school trips, I gave it. When he wanted a new phone, I saved and made sure he got it. I thought I was showing love. I didn't see that I was teaching him to take without giving. By the time Daniel turned 22, the boy I once knew had grown into a restless young man. He jumped from job to job, always complaining, always asking for more. I told myself he just needed time to figure things out. I wanted to believe in him the way I had always believed in my husband. But then the changes became harder to ignore. He started staying out late, coming home with red eyes and the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes. He whispered on the phone, slammed his bedroom door, and grew impatient with me whenever I asked questions. I prayed it was just a phase. My heart wanted to believe he was still the boy who once held my hand at the park, laughing as pigeons chased us for breadcrumbs. The day I caught him stealing was like watching the mask finally slip. The little boy I remembered was gone. In his place was a stranger with no loyalty, no kindness, and no shame. I sat on the edge of my bed after he left, my chest heavy. I stared at the empty space in the drawer where Richard's medals once lay. I thought of Richard's smile, The way he used to call me darling in the mornings. I cried until my tears dried into silence. That night, I told myself I'd get them back, no matter what it took. But I didn't know yet how deep the rabbit hole went. Because those medals didn't just hold memories. They held secrets that my husband never told me. Secrets that would soon bring the FBI to my grandson's door. And as I sat in my living room 2 nights later, waiting for Daniel to return, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm but serious. Mrs. Carter? This is Special Agent Brooks. We need to speak with you about your husband's war medals. My heart nearly stopped. The phone pressed against my ear felt heavier than bricks. My hand trembled, and I had to sit down before my knees gave way. Special Agent Brooks? I asked, my voice thin and shaky. Yes, ma'am, the man said. His voice was steady, official, and carried the kind of tone that doesn't leave room for doubt. We need to speak with you immediately about the medals your late husband received during World War II. We believe they contain items of significant national interest. National interest? My mind spun. They were medals, precious, yes, but surely nothing worth an FBI agent's phone call. At least that's what I thought before. Why? Why would you need to speak with me? I asked, gripping the arm of the couch. Because, he said, pausing as though choosing his words carefully, we have reason to believe they've fallen into the wrong hands. My heart nearly stopped. Daniel, I tried to steady my breathing. I don't have them anymore, I whispered. There was silence on the other end. Then Agent Brooks asked, Can you explain what you mean by that? I hesitated. Shame, guilt, fear. They all crashed over me at once. My grandson, I said finally, my throat tight. He stole them. 3 days ago. I tried to stop him, but he just laughed and walked away. I thought maybe he'd try to sell them for money. I had no idea they were anything more than medals. Another pause. Then the agent's voice hardened. Mrs. Carter, this is very important. Do you know where your grandson is now? Yes, I whispered. He lives in an apartment across town. Why? What's going on? I can't give you all the details right now, he said firmly. But I'll tell you this. Those medals aren't just decorations. They hold sensitive material that should never have left government possession. Please, do not contact your grandson. We will handle this. And with that, the line went dead. I sat frozen, staring at the phone in my lap. Sensitive material? What could Richard have possibly hidden in those medals? He was a soldier, not a spy. Or at least, that's what I had always believed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. My chest ached with the weight of betrayal. Not only Daniel's, but suddenly Richard's too. What else had my husband hidden from me all those years? The next morning, I tried to go about my day as if nothing had changed. I baked bread, watered the roses, and even forced myself to walk to the market. But everything felt off-kilter. Every time I saw a man in a dark suit, my stomach knotted, thinking it was the FBI. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. But most of all, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. He had been my pride once, my reason for smiling when days got too long and lonely. When his parents divorced and he came to live with me for a few years, I held him through nights of tears, cooked his favorite meals, and promised him he'd never feel unwanted. I thought our bond was unbreakable. And yet, 3 nights ago, he had looked me in the eyes and told me I'd be dead soon. That I didn't matter. It wasn't just the medals he stole. It was my trust, my heart, and everything I had built my life around. That afternoon, I pulled out an old photo album from the cabinet. Inside were pictures of Richard in uniform, grinning beside his fellow soldiers. There was one photo of him holding the medals in his hands, his smile tired, but proud. My fingers traced over his face, and I whispered, What did you do, Richard? What secrets did you leave me with? The answer didn't come. Only silence, heavy and suffocating. By the second night, my anxiety had turned into anger. I replayed Daniel's words over and over. You'll be dead soon anyway. I clenched my fist just thinking about it. How could he say that to me? The boy I had rocked to sleep. The boy I prayed for every night? It was then I made a quiet promise to myself. If Daniel thought I was just some weak old woman waiting to die, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The third day arrived, and with it came the storm. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when a sudden pounding rattled my front door. My heart leapt, and I dried my hands quickly on my apron. I hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Two men in black suits stood there. The same men, I realized, who had knocked on Daniel's door just hours earlier. "Mrs. Carter?" the taller one asked. He showed his badge again. "I'm Special Agent Brooks, and this is Agent Miller. May we come in?" My knees weakened, but I nodded and stepped aside. They entered with a quiet authority, scanning the room as though memorizing every detail. "We have reason to believe your grandson attempted to sell the metals online," Agent Miller said, his tone clipped. "Fortunately, the listing was flagged before it reached the wrong buyer. But we need to know everything you can tell us about those metals. When did your husband receive them? Did he ever mention modifying them? Or storing anything unusual inside?" I stared at them, my throat dry. "No," I said. "He never spoke about them in that way. He just said they were reminders of his service. He kept them polished, safe, but he never explained why." Are you saying he hid something inside them?" The agents exchanged a glance. Then Agent Brooks said carefully, "Your husband's metals contain microfilms. Very old ones, but still important. We can't discuss the contents with you, but let's just say they are of significant historical and financial value." Microfilms. My heart pounded. All those years, all those nights Richard sat polishing them in silence. I thought it was love, memory, pride. But maybe it was something else entirely. "Mrs. Carter," Brooks continued, his voice lowering, "we need your cooperation. This situation is dangerous. People would pay millions for what those metals carry. And some of those people are not the kind you'd want near your family." Dangerous? Millions? The words crashed around in my head like thunder. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would Richard keep something like that from me?" Neither of the agents answered. Instead, Brooks handed me a card. "If Daniel contacts you, call us immediately. Do not meet with him alone. Do you understand?" I nodded numbly, clutching the card like a lifeline. After they left, I sank into the couch, my heart racing. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. My husband's ghost seemed to sit across from me, silent, holding secrets I might never uncover. And then, as if the universe wanted to push me deeper into the storm, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "Grandma, we need to talk. Now." The text on my phone glared at me like a warning sign. "Grandma, we need to talk. Now." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hand shook as I read the words again, over and over, as though the letters themselves might change if I blinked hard enough. Just hours ago, the FBI had been sitting in my living room, warning me not to contact Daniel. And now here he was reaching out to me. My first instinct was to delete the message, pretend I never saw it, and call Agent Brooks immediately. But then the other half of me, the grandmother half, the woman who raised him, who once kissed scraped knees and wiped away his tears, wanted to hear him out. What if he was scared? What if he realized he had gone too far? But I remembered the look in his eyes 3 days ago. Cold, sharp, mocking. "You'll be dead soon anyway." That wasn't the voice of a scared boy. That was the voice of someone who had already made his choice. Still, I couldn't ignore him. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "What do you want, Daniel?" The reply came almost instantly. "Meet me. Don't tell anyone. It's about the metals." I froze. The metals. The very thing the FBI had warned me about. My stomach turned in knots. If I went, I could be walking into danger. But if I didn't, he might vanish, and then I'd never know what secrets those metals carried, or what he had already done with them. For 10 long minutes, I sat on the couch, staring at the phone, weighing the risk. Then I whispered aloud, "If Richard trusted me with them, then I need to see this through." I typed back, "Where?" The answer came quickly. "Old Park near the fountain. 9 p.m. Come alone." A chill ran through me. That park had been Daniel's favorite when he was a child. He used to chase ducks around the fountain while I sat on the bench with a bag of breadcrumbs. But at night, it was a different place entirely. Dark, empty, and dangerous. I thought about calling the FBI, but I stopped myself. If I did, They'd swoop in and take over. And maybe Daniel would run. No, I needed to look him in the eyes. I needed to hear the truth from his mouth. The hours crawled by until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. My hands were restless, fidgeting with the hem of my sweater. At exactly 8:30, I pulled on my coat, tucked my phone into my pocket, and stepped out into the night. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain. My footsteps echoed as I made my way down the quiet streets toward the park. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound too sharp. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple talk. When I reached the fountain, the park was deserted. The water trickled softly, reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. I sat on the same bench where I used to wait for him as a boy. My hands clutched my purse tightly. Then I heard footsteps. Daniel emerged from the darkness, his hood pulled up, his eyes darting nervously around. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him, his cheeks hollow, his movements restless. But the smirk was still there, curling at the edges of his lips. "Grandma," he said, sliding onto the bench beside me. "You came." I swallowed hard. "Of course I came. You said you wanted to talk. So talk." He leaned back, staring at the fountain. "I messed up," he admitted. "But you don't understand. Those medals aren't just medals. They're worth a fortune." "I know," I said quietly. "The FBI was here." His head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. "What?" "They came to the house," I said. "They told me those medals contained something called microfilms. Important ones. They said people would kill to get their hands on them." "Daniel, what have you done?" For the first time, he looked unsettled. His leg bounced nervously, and he rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know, okay? I thought they were just old war trinkets. I posted them online, but then I got messages. People offering crazy money. Like millions. That's when I knew something was up." "Millions?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Yeah." He leaned closer, his eyes shining with a strange mix of fear and greed. "But now the FBI's involved. And if they get those medals back, I get nothing. Grandma, I need your help. We can sell them ourselves. We can disappear, live like kings. You won't ever have to worry about bills again." My blood ran cold. "Daniel," I whispered, "listen to yourself. You're talking about stealing government property. Do you realize what kind of trouble you're in?" He gripped my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "Please, Grandma. You've always helped me. Don't stop now. This is our chance. Don't you want a better life?" I yanked my arm free, staring at him in disbelief. This wasn't desperation. This was greed, consuming him whole. "Daniel," I said firmly, "your grandfather died to earn those medals. They are not yours to sell. And they are not mine either. They belong to history, to the truth." For a moment, silence hung between us. Then his expression hardened. "If you won't help me," he said coldly, "then stay out of my way." He stood up, pulling his hood tighter around his face. "I still have one medal left. The most important one. And I'm not giving it back. Not to the FBI. Not to you. I'm going to sell it, and when I do, you'll regret not standing by me." My breath caught. One medal left. "Daniel, wait," I called, but he was already walking away, melting into the shadows of the park. I sat frozen on the bench, my chest tight with dread. He had one medal left, and he was planning to sell it. The thought echoed in my head until it twisted into a single, terrifying realization. If he succeeded, dangerous people might come looking for him. For me. For anyone tied to those medals. And just as I reached for my phone to call the FBI, headlights swept across the park. A black car rolled to a stop near the fountain. Two men stepped out, their faces hidden in the dark, their movements sharp and deliberate. They weren't FBI agents. They were looking for Daniel. The crack of the gunshot tore through the night like thunder. For a moment, the world stopped. My ears rang, my heart hammered, and the scene in front of me blurred, as if time itself had shattered. Daniel screamed. The two strange men dove for cover behind the fountain, and the FBI agents shouted commands I couldn't fully hear through the rush of blood in my head. "Drop your weapons." Hands in the air. Another gunshot echoed. This time I saw the flash. One of the strangers was firing back. I ducked instinctively, pressing my body against the cold stone of the bench. My chest heaved, panic clawing at my throat. I was 65 years old, and I'd never been this close to violence in my life. Richard's stories of war had seemed so far away, like echoes of another time. But here it was, bleeding into my present. "Grandma," Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. I looked up. He was on the ground, clutching the metal tight against his chest. His eyes were wide with terror, darting between the FBI and the two-armed men. "Stay down," I cried, my voice breaking. But he didn't. He scrambled to his feet, bolting toward the trees. The metal glinted in his hand as he ran. "Daniel, no." One of the FBI agents saw him and shouted, "Kid, stop. Don't move." But Daniel didn't listen. He never listened. Gunfire erupted again, sharper this time, closer. My heart stopped as I watched the boy I had raised sprint into the shadows. For a second, I couldn't tell if he had been hit or if he had just escaped. The taller stranger seized the moment. He lunged toward the fountain, firing wildly while his partner tried to circle around. The FBI agents returned fire, moving in quick, precise steps. The park lit up with muzzle flashes, shouts, and chaos. And then sudden silence. The shorter man collapsed, groaning, clutching his leg. The taller one dropped his weapon, his hands raised high. The FBI swarmed them, pinning them to the ground, shouting commands I couldn't fully process. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the bench, my body frozen in place. My heart screamed for Daniel, but my mind told me to stay put. When the chaos finally slowed, Agent Brooks appeared out of the darkness, his face pale but focused. He hurried to me, crouching down. "Mrs. Carter, are you hurt?" I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "No." "But Daniel," he ran. "He has the medal." Brooks cursed under his breath. "We saw. My team is already moving to track him. He won't get far." Tears stung my eyes. "Please don't hurt him. He's my grandson. He's lost, but he's still my boy." Brooks' gaze softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "We don't want to hurt him, ma'am. But you need to understand, if he tries to sell that medal, he'll attract far worse than the two men you just saw. He's in deep." His words sank into me like stones. I thought of Daniel's face, the fear, the greed, the confusion. My sweet little boy who once chased ducks in this very park was now running through the dark with men and bullets chasing him. The FBI loaded the captured men into the black car, their groans muffled by the sound of radios crackling. I stood, my legs weak, and stared at the fountain where it all began. The water still trickled, calm and steady, as if mocking the storm we had just survived. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window made me jump. My phone sat on the nightstand, Agent Brooks' card beside it. I prayed Daniel would call me, that he would realize what kind of danger he was in and come home. But the phone stayed silent. By morning, exhaustion weighed me down like chains. I shuffled into the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the table, staring blankly at the steam curling upward. That's when the doorbell rang. I nearly dropped the cup. My heart raced as I hurried to the door, half expecting FBI, half expecting Daniel. But when I opened it, I froze. It wasn't either. It was a small package sitting neatly on the porch. No return address, no note, just a plain brown box, taped shut. My stomach dropped. I bent down slowly, my hands trembling as I picked it up. The weight of it was wrong, too light to be anything ordinary, too heavy to be empty. I carried it inside, setting it carefully on the table. My fingers hovered over the tape, hesitation gripping me. A dozen thoughts spun through my mind. Could it be from Daniel? From the FBI? Or worse, from the men who had been chasing him? Finally, I peeled the tape back. Inside, cushioned in crumpled paper, was something that made my blood run cold. It was a single war medal, and wrapped around its ribbon was a note scrawled in messy handwriting. "If you ever want to see Daniel alive again, you'll do exactly as we say." The medal gleamed under the kitchen light, its ribbon crumpled from the way it had been wrapped. My fingers shook as I held the note closer, forcing my tired eyes to focus on the messy scrawl. "If you ever want to see Daniel alive again, you'll do exactly as we say." For a long time, I couldn't breathe. My chest ached, my mind whirling. They had him. Whoever they were, they had my grandson. The medal was proof. Proof that this wasn't a trick, not a prank, not some desperate bluff. Someone had pulled him from the shadows after he ran from the park, and now they were using him like bait. I sank into the chair at the kitchen table, the note trembling in my hand. I thought about Richard, about the medals he had guarded so fiercely, the secrets he had taken to his grave. Secrets now dragging Daniel into a world far darker than he could ever imagine. For a moment, I hated Richard. Hated him for leaving me with these cursed things. Hated him for never telling me the truth. Hated him for making me the one who had to carry this burden. But then the anger shifted. My eyes blurred with tears, and I whispered, "Richard, what do I do? Tell me how to save him." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I wanted to call Agent Brooks immediately, but the note's words screamed at me. "You'll do exactly as we say." If I called the FBI, if they even suspected, Daniel's life could be the price. I read the note again, hoping for instructions, but there were none. Just the threat, the medal, the weight of what it meant. They wanted me to wait, to sit here in fear until they told me the next step. I pressed the medal against my chest and closed my eyes. The medal was cold, but in my mind, I saw Richard polishing it with careful hands. I remembered the way Daniel's small fingers used to trace the ribbons when he was little, before greed and recklessness swallowed him whole. I had two choices: obey and pray they gave him back, or take matters into my own hands. By mid-morning, the phone rang. I jumped, my heart in my throat. When I answered, a distorted voice crackled on the line. "Mrs. Carter." I gripped the receiver tightly. "Where's my grandson?" "He's alive. For now." The voice was low, calm, and full of menace. "You'll receive instructions soon. Do not call the FBI. Do not speak of this to anyone. If you do, Daniel dies. Do you understand?" Tears burned my eyes. "Please, he's just a boy." "Do you understand?" The voice snapped. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Good. Keep the medal safe. It will buy his life. Wait for a call." The line went dead. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the silence pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't carry. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to run into the street and beg someone to save him. But instead, I sank to the floor and sobbed into my hands. For hours, I drifted through the house like a ghost. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like eyes watching me. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat with the medal in my lap, waiting for the phone to ring again. By evening, the weight of it all became unbearable. I pulled out the old photo albums again. Daniel's face smiled up at me from a dozen pages. His first day of school, his Little League games, his birthday cakes. He had once been a sweet, joyful boy. The boy who used to slip flowers into my pockets when we walked through the park. How had we ended up here? I thought of Richard again, of how he had carried the medals with such care. He must have known something like this could happen. Why else would he hide secrets in them? Why else would he never speak of it? I whispered through my tears, "Richard, if you're watching, help me save him." The clock ticked past 9, 10, 11. The phone never rang again. I finally dragged myself to bed, though sleep was impossible. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, clutching the medal to my chest like it could somehow protect me. At some point in the night, exhaustion overtook me. My dreams were filled with shadows, voices, and Daniel's face calling out for me. When I woke, the morning sun was pouring through the curtains. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then my eyes landed on the medal on the nightstand and the note beside it. It was real. I forced myself up and shuffled to the kitchen. My hands moved on autopilot, making coffee, though I doubted I could drink it. I sat at the table, staring at the dark liquid, when the sound of footsteps outside froze me in place. I glanced at the window. A figure moved across the yard. My breath caught. Slowly, I stood and edged toward the front door. The shadow shifted closer. I unlocked the door and opened it a crack. And there, standing on my porch, was Daniel. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, his eyes wild with fear. "Grandma," he gasped, stumbling forward. "They're coming." Daniel stumbled into my arms before I could even think, his body trembling, his skin clammy. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, stained with dirt, and his lip was split. I felt the sharp bones of his back through the fabric as he clung to me like a frightened child. "Grandma," he whispered hoarsely, his breath hot against my neck. "They're coming. You have to hide me." My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled him inside and shut the door fast, locking it and drawing the curtains in one motion. My old body wasn't built for speed, but fear can lend strength to anyone. I sat him down on the couch, cupping his face with my hands. "Daniel, my sweet boy, what happened to you?" His eyes darted around the room, his body jerking like he expected someone to burst through the walls at any moment. "I ran," he said, barely above a whisper. "They had me locked up somewhere. Basement, I think. They wanted me to—" His voice cracked, and he buried his face in his hands. "I couldn't do it, Grandma. I couldn't." I brushed his hair back from his forehead, tears filling my eyes. "You're safe now. You're here with me. No one is going to hurt you." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The phone call, the metal, the threat, all of it meant we were far from safe. If Daniel had escaped, they would be furious. And if he was right, they were already on their way. I moved quickly, fetching a wet cloth to clean his face. He winced when I dabbed at the split in his lip. "Tell me everything," I urged. "What did they want from you?" Daniel swallowed hard, his hands trembling in his lap. "They kept asking about the medals. They wanted me to tell them where the rest were. Said if I didn't they'd—" His voice broke again, and he couldn't finish. I clenched my jaw, rage burning hot in my chest. Whoever these people were, they had taken my grandson and beaten him for information he didn't even have. "I don't know, Grandma," he whispered, shaking his head. "I told them I only had the one. They didn't believe me. They said the others held things worth more than money. Secrets. Codes. I don't even understand." I froze. Codes. That word rang in my ears like a bell. Richard had been a soldier, yes, but he had also been quiet, secretive about certain parts of his service. What if the medals weren't just honors? What if he had carried more than memories home from the war? I forced my thoughts back to Daniel. "Did you see their faces?" He nodded. "Some of them. Masked sometimes. But one man," his eyes darkened and he lowered his voice. "He had a scar across his cheek. Deep. Like someone had cut him open once." A chill ran through me. The description alone was enough to make my skin crawl. Before I could ask more, the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside made us both freeze. Daniel's hand clutched mine so tight it hurt. "They found me," he whispered. His whole body went rigid. I moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just a hair. A black SUV had pulled into the street, its engine still running. Two men sat inside, their silhouettes dark against the glow of the dashboard lights. Panic surged through me. I thought about calling Agent Brooks. I thought about grabbing my old shotgun from the closet. I thought about running with Daniel out the back door. But before I could act, the SUV's engine roared again. Slowly, deliberately, it rolled past my house. The men inside didn't look toward the porch, but I could feel their presence like a weight pressing against my chest. They didn't stop. They didn't get out. They just drove away, disappearing into the dark. I let the curtain fall and pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering. Daniel looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "They know, Grandma. They know I came here. They're watching." I crossed the room, kneeling in front of him, taking his hands in mine. "Then we'll outsmart them. They think they can scare us, but we're stronger than that. I won't let them take you again." For the first time, Daniel's tears spilled freely. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should never have touched Grandpa's medals. I was stupid. I didn't know." "Sure." I hushed him, stroking his hair. "We'll fix this. We'll find a way." But in my heart, I knew fixing this would not be simple. These men were petty thieves. They were organized, dangerous, and desperate for something Richard had hidden. By midnight, Daniel had fallen into an uneasy sleep on the couch, his body curled up under a blanket. I sat in the armchair across from him, clutching the metal like a lifeline. My eyes stayed fixed on the window, half expecting headlights to sweep across the wall at any moment. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed Richard's funeral, the folded flag pressed into my hands, the medals arranged neatly in their box. Why had I never questioned what they truly were? Why had I been so blind? I thought of Agent Brooks again. I thought of the way his eyes had sharpened when he saw the medals, the weight in his voice when he called them classified. He knew more than he had said, and maybe, just maybe, he was the only one who could help us now. But if I called him and the kidnappers found out? The clock ticked past 2 when I finally stood, too restless to sit still any longer. I went to the hall closet and pulled out Richard's old lockbox. My hand shook as I set it on the table. The other medals were still inside, gleaming in the dim light. I stared at them, my mind torn between fear and determination. These little circles of metal held secrets worth millions, secrets worth killing for. As I reached for the first medal, a sound split the night. Glass shattered in the kitchen. Daniel jolted awake with a cry as I spun toward the noise. A dark figure climbed through the broken window, boots crunching on the shards, a pistol gleaming in his hand. The glass crunched like bones under boots. The man slipped into my kitchen like a shadow given flesh, the gun in his hand glinting under the moonlight that spilled through the broken window. For a second, I couldn't move. My body froze where I stood, one hand still hovering over Richard's lockbox. Daniel's sharp intake of breath broke the spell. An instinct roared through me like fire. "Run!" I hissed. Daniel stumbled to his feet, eyes wide, but the man's gun swung toward him immediately. "Don't," the intruder said. His voice was low, accented, cold. "The boy doesn't move. Neither of you do." My pulse pounded so hard I thought I might faint. I raised my hand slowly, my mind racing. "What do you want?" I forced my voice steady. The man stepped closer, his boots grinding glass into the linoleum. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face half hidden beneath a hood, but the scar across his cheek was unmistakable. Daniel had described him perfectly. Scarface. His eyes flicked to the lockbox on the table. "You know what I want. Don't play games, old woman." The medals. I moved instinctively, pushing the box slightly behind me. "They're not yours." He chuckled, the sound dark and humorless. "They're not yours either. They belong to history, to men greater than you'll ever understand. Hand them over and maybe I'll let the boy live." Daniel whimpered, pressing against the back of the couch like he could melt into it. His fear fueled my rage. I stood taller, even though my knees trembled. "You hurt him once already," I said, my voice sharp as broken glass. "If you think I'll hand you anything after that, you're a fool." Scarface tilted his head, studying me. Then he moved fast, lunging across the room and grabbing me by the front of my nightgown. His breath stank of cigarettes as he hissed in my face. "You think you're brave? You think an old hag can stand between me and what I want?" I didn't think, I acted. My knee shot up hard into his groin. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough for me to wrench free. "Daniel, run." I screamed again. Daniel bolted for the hallway, bare feet slapping the floor. Scarface roared, turning his gun toward him. I grabbed the closest thing within reach, a heavy ceramic lamp, and swung it with all the strength my 65-year-old arms could muster. The lamp shattered against his shoulder, sending him stumbling sideways with a snarl. The gun clattered to the floor. "Go!" I shouted, shoving Daniel toward the back door. We sprinted through the kitchen, glass cutting into my slippers as I dragged him behind me. My heart thundered in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The night air hit us like a slap when I threw open the back door. We ran across the yard, the grass wet with dew, the dark trees looming like giants. Behind us, Scarface's voice bellowed, "You can't hide. I'll find you both." A gunshot split the night. The bullet tore into the wooden frame of the door, just inches from my head. Splinters rained down as I pulled Daniel into the shadows of the trees. We didn't stop until we were deep in the woods behind the house. I leaned against a tree, chest heaving, clutching Daniel close. "Grandma," he panted, his eyes wide and shining in the moonlight. "We can't go back. He'll kill us." I swallowed hard, brushing his hair back from his sweaty forehead. "I know, sweetheart. I know." We sat there for what felt like hours, listening for footsteps, engines, anything. But the woods were silent except for the chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Finally, Daniel whispered, What are we going to do? I looked at him, at his bruised face, his terrified eyes, and I felt a wave of steel settle into my bones. We fight back, I said quietly. His brow furrowed. How? They've got guns, Grandma. They've got everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the metal I had been clutching before the break-in. The metal glinted faintly in the moonlight. They want these, I said, and I'm going to find out why. If your grandfather hid something in them, then maybe he also left us a way to survive this. Daniel's eyes flicked to the metal, then back to me. For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of the boy he had once been, the boy who believed I could fix anything. Do you think Grandpa knew this would happen? He asked softly. I swallowed hard. I think he knew something like it was possible. Richard was a clever man. He didn't just survive the war, he outsmarted it. And if he left secrets in these metals, he wanted them protected. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, I'm sorry, Grandma. For everything. For stealing them. For being so stupid. Tears burned my eyes. I pulled him close, kissing his hair. You're not stupid. You're young. You made a mistake. What matters is that you're here and we still have a chance. He sniffled against my shoulder. I'll help. Whatever you need, I'll help. I nodded, wiping my face with the back of my hand. Good. Because we'll need to be smarter than them. Stronger. Quieter. The woods shifted around us with the first hints of dawn. Birds began to stir in the trees, and the horizon glowed faintly pink. I knew we couldn't stay there. Scarface and his men wouldn't give up. They would circle back, search every inch of my house, maybe even torch it to the ground. We had to move. But as I stood, pulling Daniel up with me, the sound of an engine rumbled faintly through the still morning air. Daniel stiffened. Grandma, do you hear that? I froze, straining my ears. The growl of tires on gravel grew louder. Then headlights cut through the trees, sweeping across the trunks. A second black SUV rolled slowly along the edge of the woods. This one didn't pass by. It stopped. The driver's side door opened, and another man stepped out. He wasn't Scarface, but the way he carried himself screamed danger all the same. He scanned the trees with sharp, calculating eyes. Daniel clutched my arm, his voice shaking. They found us, and then, from the opposite side of the woods, more headlights flickered on. Another vehicle. Another set of men. We were surrounded. The hum of engines vibrated through the trees, a low growl that seemed to seep into my bones. 2 SUVs, 2 groups of men, and us, trapped in the middle of the woods with nowhere to run. Daniel's grip on my arm tightened until my skin burned. Grandma, he whispered, his voice breaking, what do we do? I forced myself to breathe. My body screamed with fear, but I couldn't let him see it. He needed strength, even if mine was borrowed from thin air. We don't panic, I whispered back. We think. The men fanned out from the SUVs, flashlights sweeping across the underbrush. Beams of light cut through the trees, slicing the dark like knives. They can't be far, one of them barked. His voice was sharp, commanding, the kind of voice that led others. I crouched low, pulling Daniel down beside me behind a thick oak. My knees screamed in protest, but I ignored the pain. Listen to me, I whispered, my lips close to his ear. We're going to move when they turn their lights the other way. Stay low, stay quiet, and do not let go of my hand. He nodded quickly, his breath ragged, his face pale in the faint glow. We waited. Every second stretched into an eternity. Flashlight beams danced closer, then away again. Now I hissed. We crawled through the underbrush, the damp earth cold beneath my palms. Twigs snapped under our weight, but the engines rumbled loud enough to mask the sound. My heart pounded so hard I feared it would give us away. We moved toward the creek that cut through the woods behind my property. I knew these trees. I knew every bend in the path, every hollow log, every dip where a body could disappear. Richard and I had walked these trails for years. The sound of rushing water grew louder, a soft promise of cover. But then, over here, a voice shouted. A beam of light swung directly toward us. Run, I gasped. We scrambled to our feet and bolted. Branches whipped against my arms, roots snagged at my slippers, but adrenaline drove me forward. Daniel's hand was slick with sweat in mine, his breath ragged in his chest. Behind us, men shouted. Boots pounded the ground. The forest erupted in chaos. We burst through the trees and stumbled into the creek, icy water splashing up to our knees. Daniel gasped, nearly falling, but I yanked him upright. "Keep moving," I urged, my voice breaking with the effort. We waded upstream, the water rushing around our legs, the sound masking our footsteps. But the flashlight soon cut through the trees again, beams bouncing off the water's surface. "There," someone yelled. Bullets cracked through the air, snapping branches overhead. Daniel screamed and ducked, pulling me down with him. The water surged cold against my chest as we pressed low, the current tugging at my gown. My lungs burned, but I held tight to Daniel, shielding him with my body as best I could. "Grandma," he choked out, his voice raw. "I've got you," I rasped. "I won't let them take you." For a moment, everything blurred. The lights, the gunfire, the roar of water. And then I saw it, an old drainage tunnel along the creek bank, half hidden by overgrown vines. "Over there." I pointed, dragging Daniel with me. We stumbled into the tunnel, water rushing around our ankles as darkness swallowed us whole. The shouts outside grew fainter, the beams of light unable to pierce the thick stone walls. We collapsed against the damp wall, gasping for breath. Daniel's teeth chattered as he clutched my arm. "Grandma, they're going to kill us." I cupped his face, forcing his eyes to meet mine. "No, they're going to underestimate us. That will be their mistake." The tunnel stretched deep into the earth, its end lost in shadow. The air smelled of rust and mold, but it offered safety for now. We waded deeper, the water rising to our waists, until the sounds of the men outside faded completely. Finally, we sank onto a narrow ledge inside the tunnel, exhaustion weighing us down. For a long while, we just sat there, breathing, shivering, listening to the drip of water echoing in the dark. Daniel leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "Why us, Grandma? Why Grandpa's medals? Why not just leave us alone?" I stroked his wet hair, my own mind spinning. "Because your grandfather was smarter than they are. He hid something from them, something so important they've hunted for it all these years. And now they think we're the key." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "Maybe we are." His words struck me harder than the gunfire. He was right. Richard hadn't left those medals behind by accident. He had trusted me, even unknowingly, to guard them. The weight of that trust pressed heavy on my chest. But beneath it, I felt something else, resolve. I kissed Daniel's damp forehead. "Then we'll find whatever it is before they do. We'll end this together." He nodded weakly, his small hand clutching mine. The silence of the tunnel wrapped around us like a blanket. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to believe we might survive. But hope is a fragile thing. Just as Daniel's eyes began to close, a faint light flickered at the far end of the tunnel. Not daylight. Flashlights. Voices echoed off the stone walls, bouncing closer, growing louder. They went this way. Daniel's eyes snapped open, terror flooding his face. "They're in here," another voice growled. The light grew brighter. Boots splashed in the water. They had found us. The tunnel walls shook with the sound of splashing boots. The beam of a flashlight cut through the dark like a blade, bouncing off the wet stone and throwing wild shadows across the water. Daniel's breath hitched in his chest. He clutched my arm, trembling so hard I could feel it in my bones. "They're here," he whispered. "Stay calm," I murmured, though my own pulse pounded so loudly it drowned out the rush of the creek. We pressed ourselves flat against the damp wall, praying the shadows might hide us. But the tunnel was narrow, unforgiving. Hiding would only buy us seconds. We needed something else. I scanned the darkness. My eyes adjusted just enough to make out the shape of rusted pipes jutting from the wall, thick with grime. One pipe dripped steadily, leaving a slick patch of algae at its base. And then I saw it. A small opening above the pipes, barely big enough for a body to squeeze through. A maintenance hatch, maybe. Or an old runoff vent. "Daniel," I whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Up there." He followed my gaze, eyes widening. "I can't fit." "You can," I cut him off. "You're smaller than me. You climb and I'll push. Hurry." The flashlight beam swung closer, footsteps pounding the water. Voices barked orders in a language I didn't recognize. Daniel scrambled toward the pipe, his wet hands slipping against the metal. I braced myself under him, shoving him upward with all the strength I had left. My shoulders burned, my knees screamed, but finally his fingers caught the lip of the opening. Go, I urged, my voice a hoarse whisper. Pull yourself in. He grunted, struggling, his feet kicking against the wall. The flashlight beam swept across the tunnel and landed on us. There, a man shouted. Daniel. I shoved harder, desperation fueling me. His body slid into the opening, vanishing into the dark above. Grandma, he gasped, reaching down with one hand. Take my hand. I jumped, fingers brushing his but not catching. The sound of rushing water and pounding boots filled the tunnel as the men closed in. The first one appeared in the beam of his own light, tall, muscular, gun raised. Scarface, his eyes locked on mine, a cruel smile spreading across his face. It's over, he growled. I didn't think. I grabbed the rusted pipe and yanked with every ounce of fury in my body. It groaned, then snapped free, water spraying out in a powerful burst. The sudden jet slammed into Scarface's chest, knocking him off balance. He cursed, slipping on the algae-slick floor, his gun clattering into the water. Grandma, Daniel screamed again. His hand reached lower, straining for me. I leapt, catching his wrist with both hands. He pulled, I pushed, my arm screaming in protest. Somehow, impossibly, he dragged me into the vent just as more men surged into the tunnel below. Bullets ricocheted off stone, sparks flying. We collapsed in the narrow shaft, gasping, drenched, shivering. The vent was pitch dark, the air thick with dust and mold. But we were alive. Keep moving, I whispered, crawling forward on hands and knees. Don't stop. The shaft twisted and turned, the metal groaning under our weight. Every scrape of my palms against the rough surface sent shivers up my arms. Daniel crawled ahead, his breathing ragged but determined. At last, faint light glowed ahead. We emerged into a crumbling utility chamber, its walls lined with rusted machinery. Old electric panels hummed faintly, though most were dead. Daniel slumped against the wall, his face pale, his body shaking. We made it. I knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his cheek. For now. But they won't stop. They'll follow. Tears filled his eyes. Grandma, I can't. I can't keep running like this. I'll slow you down. They'll catch us. I gripped his shoulders firmly, forcing him to meet my gaze. Listen to me, Daniel Carter. You are not a burden. You are my grandson. And we're going to survive this, together. Do you understand me? His chin wobbled, but he nodded. Why, yes. I pulled him into a fierce hug, my chest aching with both love and fear. For a brief moment, I let myself remember the little boy who used to sit on my lap, sticky with popsicle juice, begging for one more story before bed. That boy was still in there, buried under mistakes and fear. And I would fight to my last breath to save him. We rested only minutes before I forced us to move again. The chamber had 2 exits, one sealed with a rusted grate, the other leading into another narrow corridor. I chose the corridor. We crept forward, the walls closing in around us, the sound of dripping water echoing endlessly. My muscles ached, my feet were raw, but my mind was sharp with determination. Daniel walked close behind me, clutching the metal I had pressed into his hand earlier. I could hear him whispering under his breath, almost like a prayer. We turned a corner and froze. Ahead, another figure stood in the corridor. Not one of the pursuers, this man wore a dark suit, his face pale, his expression unreadable. He didn't hold a gun. He simply raised his hand, palm out, and said, Mrs. Carter. Daniel, come with me if you want to live. My stomach dropped. How do you know our names? I demanded, pulling Daniel behind me. The man's eyes flicked to the metal in Daniel's hand. Because your husband and I served together. And I know exactly what those medals contain. Daniel gasped softly. I narrowed my eyes. If you were his friend, why are you here now, dressed like one of them? The man gave the faintest smile. Because not everyone on your side can be trusted. The FBI, the military, the men chasing you. They all want what's hidden in those medals. But I'm the only one who wants to protect you. His hand stretched further, beckoning. Time is short, he said quietly. Scarface and his men are seconds behind you. Decide now. Daniel's fingers tightened around mine. His eyes searched mine desperately. Grandma, do we trust him? Behind us, distant shouts echoed in the tunnel. Boots splashed closer. We were out of time. The corridor seemed to shrink around us. My back pressed against the damp stone, Daniel's trembling hand clutched in mine, and the stranger's voice echoing like a verdict. Come with me if you want to live. Behind us, Scarface's men thundered closer, their boots splashing through the flooded tunnel. The light of their flashlights already glimmered faintly around the bend. I studied the man in front of me, every instinct screaming not to trust him. His suit was neat, his hair cropped military short, his shoes too clean for someone crawling through tunnels. He looked like he belonged in an office, not down here. And yet his eyes, they weren't cruel like Scarface's. They weren't greedy like the grandson who had once smirked and told me I'd be dead soon anyway. They were sharp, watchful, but not unkind. Grandma, Daniel whispered, his voice raw with panic. They're almost here. Please decide. The men's voices grew louder. Scarface barked orders, furious. I gritted my teeth. Fine, but if you betray us, you'll regret it. The stranger didn't flinch. He simply nodded once. Follow me. He turned sharply down a side passage I hadn't noticed before. A narrow, low tunnel hidden behind a rotted wooden beam. Daniel and I scrambled after him, my knees screaming with every step. The beam scraped my back as I pushed through, the smell of mold and rust overwhelming. We crawled on hands and knees through the tight shaft until it opened into a chamber lit by the faint glow of old electric bulbs. The stranger pulled a battered metal door shut behind us, sliding an iron bolt across. Almost instantly, fists pounded on the other side. Scarface's voice thundered through the metal. Open it, old man. You think you can hide them from me? Daniel flinched at the sound, pressing himself against me. The stranger remained calm, his face unreadable. That door will hold. For a while. I narrowed my eyes. Start talking. Who are you? He met my stare evenly. My name is Thomas Hale. I served with Richard in Vietnam. We worked together on special operations. Your husband wasn't just a decorated soldier. He was part of an intelligence unit tasked with recovering stolen technology. The medals you have, his gaze flicked to Daniel's hand, aren't just honors. They contain microfilms smuggled out of enemy lines. Blueprints, names, codes, worth billions even today. Daniel's breath caught. So it's true. That's why they're after us. Thomas nodded once. Yes, and your husband entrusted them to you because he didn't trust anyone else. He knew one day the past would come crawling back. I felt my chest tighten. Richard had taken so many secrets to his grave. Secrets I never asked about, never wanted to. And now here they were, clawing their way into my life years later. Why now? I asked sharply. Why, after all these years, are men hunting us in the dead of night? Thomas's jaw clenched. Because word got out. Someone tried to sell them. Someone young, desperate, greedy. That's how Scarface's people learned the metals still existed. I closed my eyes, fury surging hot in my chest. My grandson's face flashed in my mind, the smirk, the dismissive laugh, the way he said I'd be dead soon. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had painted a target on both our backs. Daniel's voice broke the silence. If these films are so valuable, why don't we just destroy them? Then no one will want us anymore. Thomas shook his head firmly. Destroying them would only make things worse. The people after you don't just want the films, they want to make sure no one else has them. If they think you've destroyed them, they'll kill you anyway to be sure. The pounding on the door grew louder, more violent. The metal shook with every slam. Scarface's voice cut through again, colder this time. You can't hide forever, Eleanor. We'll tear this place apart if we have to. I felt Daniel tremble against me, his breathing shallow. I wrapped an arm around him and glared at Thomas. Then what's your plan? Because hiding here won't save us. Thomas's expression softened slightly. There's a way out. A service tunnel that leads to the surface. From there, I can get you to a safe house. But it won't be easy. And you have to trust me completely. Trust. That word tasted bitter. I had trusted family, only to be betrayed. Trusted kindness, only to be mocked. And now I was supposed to trust a stranger who appeared out of nowhere, claiming to have known my husband? I studied him hard. His posture was rigid, but not threatening. His eyes didn't waver. He reminded me of Richard in the quiet way he carried himself. Not loud, not boastful, just steady. Finally, I nodded. Show us. He motioned to a hatch in the corner of the chamber. It was rusted, its hinges groaning as he forced it open. Cold air rushed in from below, carrying the faint smell of earth and oil. This leads down, Thomas explained. We'll crawl about 100 yards, then climb up into an old subway maintenance corridor. Once we're topside, I'll call in help. Daniel clutched the metal tightly to his chest. His voice was small. Grandma, what if this is a trap? I kissed the top of his damp hair. Then we'll fight our way out. Together. We descended into the shaft one by one, Thomas first, then Daniel, then me. The ladder was slick with condensation, the rungs biting into my hands. My knees shook, but I forced myself downward. The tunnel below was tighter, the ceiling low enough that we had to crouch. Pipes rattled overhead, dripping icy water onto our necks. The floor sloped unevenly, puddles forming where the stone sagged. We moved slowly, our footsteps echoing softly in the dark. Daniel's breathing was loud, shaky. I squeezed his shoulder whenever I could reach him, grounding him. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel widened. Thomas raised a hand, signaling us to stop. He tilted his head, listening. I held my breath. Voices. Faint, but coming from ahead. Not Scarface's men this time. These voices spoke in English, calm, methodical. Search every alcove. They can't have gone far. Daniel's eyes went wide. They're here too. Thomas's jaw tightened. FBI. They must have tracked the same signal Scarface's men did. We can't let them see us. The realization hit me like ice water. Not even the government was safe. Everyone wanted the medals. Everyone wanted us silenced. Thomas motioned for us to crouch low, pressing ourselves against the damp wall. Two beams of light swept past the tunnel mouth ahead, bobbing as the agents moved methodically through the passage. For a moment, it seemed they would pass. But then Daniel's foot slipped, splashing into a shallow puddle. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The beams froze. Did you hear that? One voice asked. The second beam swung toward us, blinding. Hey, stop right there. Thomas cursed under his breath. Run. We bolted, water splashing underfoot, lungs burning. The tunnel twisted and turned, the beams chasing us like relentless ghosts. My legs screamed, but I forced them to keep moving. Daniel clung to the metal like his life depended on it. We burst into a wider chamber, the ground rising sharply. Ahead, I saw the faint outline of a stairwell leading upward. Go, I shouted, shoving Daniel toward it. Climb. He scrambled up, Thomas close behind. I followed, my body trembling with exhaustion. The sound of boots thundered behind us as the agents gave chase. Halfway up the stairs, a shot rang out. The bullet sparked against the wall inches from my head. Daniel screamed. I shoved him higher, panic flooding me. Another shot. This one hit the step beside my foot, shattering the stone. Thomas whirled, pulling a small pistol from under his jacket. He fired twice, the sharp cracks deafening in the enclosed space. One agent shouted, another ducked for cover. Keep moving. Thomas barked. We reached the top of the stairs and burst through a rusted metal door into the night air. The sudden cold wind slapped my face, carrying the smell of rain and gasoline. We were in a deserted alleyway, trash bins lined against the wall, street lamps flickering weakly overhead. But there was no time to breathe. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. Its headlights blinded us, its engine growling like a beast. The driver's door flew open. Scarface stepped out, his gun gleaming in the light. His lips curled into a snarl. Told you, old woman, he spat. You can't run forever. The night air stung my face, heavy with the smell of rain and smoke. My chest burned from running, every breath like fire in my lungs. But none of it mattered, because standing at the mouth of the alley was Scarface, his pistol gleaming under the yellow street lamp. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply leveled the gun at me, his scar twisting as his lips pulled into a cold grin. I told you, he said softly, almost like a lover whispering a secret. You can't run forever, Eleanor. Daniel whimpered beside me, clutching the metal so tight his knuckles turned white. I could feel him shaking against my hip, could hear his breath hitch with terror. Thomas stepped forward, placing himself between us and Scarface. His own pistol was still in his hand, steady despite the tremor of exhaustion that ran through him. This doesn't have to end in blood, Thomas said evenly. You want the medals? Then let the boy and his grandmother walk away. Scarface laughed. The sound was low, chilling, a cruel mockery. You think I care about their lives? No, Hale. I want her to suffer. I want her to watch as everything she loves is stripped away. The medals are just the beginning. His eyes slid to me, sharp and venomous. You should have stayed in your little house, knitting sweaters and baking pies, pretending the world forgot you. But you couldn't, could you? Now look where we are. I straightened, meeting his gaze with fire of my own. You talk too much for a coward who hides behind a gun. His grin faltered, just a fraction. And I saw it, the flicker of rage beneath his smug mask. Thomas noticed it too. We need to move, he whispered under his breath, his eyes never leaving Scarface. The alley was narrow, boxed in on both sides by tall brick walls. Behind us, the rusted metal door we had come through was locked from the other side. Forward, only Scarface stood in our way, his SUV idling behind him. We were trapped. Scarface's gun twitched toward Daniel. Give me the medal, boy. Right now, or I put a bullet in her head and make you watch. Daniel let out a strangled cry, pressing closer into me. His eyes filled with tears, darting between the gun and my face. Don't you dare, I hissed, pulling him tight against me. Don't you dare give him anything. Scarface tilted his head, his grin returning. Such spirit. But spirit won't save you, old woman. And then, before I could think, Thomas moved. He fired. The crack of the shot split the night. Scarface staggered back, his arm jerking as the bullet grazed his shoulder. He roared, his pistol discharging wildly, the bullet ricocheting off the brick inches from Daniel's head. Run, Thomas shouted. I grabbed Daniel's hand and bolted, dragging him toward the side of the alley. My eyes scanned frantically for escape, for anything. That's when I saw it, a rusted fire escape ladder, half collapsed but still clinging to the wall like a skeleton. This way, I screamed. Daniel scrambled up first, his small hands slipping on the wet rungs. I pushed from below, forcing him higher. Thomas backed toward us, firing again, driving Scarface behind the SUV for cover. Bullets tore through trash bins, the metallic clangs deafening. I climbed after Daniel, my arms burning, my knees raw against the iron. Thomas leapt onto the ladder just as Scarface leaned out and fired again. The metal rung inches from Thomas's foot exploded in sparks. Go! Go! Thomas barked, shoving us higher. We reached the roof, panting, pulling ourselves onto the gravelly surface. Daniel collapsed to his knees, clutching the metal like it was the only thing tethering him to life. Thomas hauled himself up last, his chest heaving. He crouched low, scanning the edge. Below, Scarface shouted into a radio, barking orders. Within seconds, more SUVs screeched into the alley, doors flying open as men in black spilled out like ants. They've got us surrounded, Thomas muttered. My heart thundered. Then we keep moving. We sprinted across the rooftops, leaping over narrow gaps, slipping on the rain-slick gravel. Daniel struggled, his legs weak, but I pulled him onward, whispering encouragement with every step. We darted past chimneys and satellite dishes, the night wind howling in our ears. Behind us, Scarface's men clambered onto the roofs, their flashlights stabbing the dark. Faster, Thomas urged, but the roof ahead sloped sharply downward toward a wide gap, too wide to leap across. Beyond it, another building loomed, its roof just out of reach. Daniel froze at the edge, staring down into the 10-foot drop to the concrete below. We can't make it. Scarface's men shouted behind us, their footsteps pounding closer. Thomas scanned quickly, then pointed. There, the skylight. A large glass panel jutted from the roof just a few feet away. Without hesitation, Thomas swung his pistol and fired. The glass shattered, raining shards onto the dark space below. "Go," he ordered. "Through it." Daniel hesitated, his face pale with terror. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my eyes. "Trust me, Daniel. Jump. I'll be right behind you." His lip trembled, but he nodded. With a strangled cry, he leapt through the broken skylight, vanishing into the dark below. I didn't think. I followed, the wind rushing past me, the crash of glass echoing in my ears. I landed hard on a wooden floor, pain jolting up my knees. Dust billowed around me, choking my lungs. Daniel lay beside me, coughing but alive. Thomas dropped through last, rolling expertly, already on his feet with his gun raised. We were inside what looked like an abandoned factory. Rusted machinery loomed in the shadows, cobwebs clinging to the rafters. The air smelled of oil and mildew. For a moment, silence. Then boots hit the roof above us. Voices shouted. They went inside. Thomas grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a stairwell at the far end. "This way. Hurry." We stumbled down the stairs, deeper into the factory's belly. The walls closed in, pipes rattling, shadows stretching long and strange. Daniel wheezed beside me, his small body trembling with exhaustion. At the bottom, we burst into a cavernous basement, rows of crates stacked high. The air was damp, the concrete floor slick. And that's when I saw it, spray painted across the wall in crude, red letters. "No escape." My blood ran cold. Thomas's jaw tightened. They've been here before. This place is one of their strongholds. A door slammed behind us. Scarface's laughter echoed through the factory, dark and triumphant. "You're in my house now, Eleanor." I clutched Daniel to me, my heart hammering. We were trapped again. The basement walls pressed in on us, cold and damp. My lungs fought to draw breath, every inhale heavy with the sour stench of mildew and rust. Daniel clung to my side, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. His tiny fingers dug into the metal, as though it were the last piece of himself he could still hold on to. Above us, boots pounded across the factory floor. Scarface's voice carried through the hollow space, mocking and confident. "Run, run, run, little rats in my maze," he taunted. "There's nowhere left for you to go." Thomas crouched near a stack of crates, his pistol raised, his eyes scanning the shadows. He was calm, too calm, the kind of stillness that comes before lightning splits the sky. "We need another exit," he whispered. I glanced around the basement. The crates were old, wooden, many stamped with military codes that sent a chill down my spine. A steel door sat across the room, padlocked and rusted, but the hinges looked weak. "What about there?" I pointed. Thomas shook his head. "Too loud. They'd hear us break it." A metallic clang echoed above. Scarface's men were opening doors, searching. Daniel tugged at my sleeve, his eyes wide. "Grandma," the writing on the wall. "No escape." What if it's true? I knelt, cupping his face in my hands. "Listen to me, Daniel. There is always a way. Always. Do you hear me?" His chin wobbled, but he nodded. "Why, yes." I kissed his forehead, my heart aching at the fear in his eyes. Thomas moved closer, his whisper urgent. "We'll split their focus. I'll draw them away. You take Daniel and run the second I give you the signal." "No," I said sharply, my voice low but fierce. "We stay together. Richard trusted you once, maybe. But I don't, not enough to leave my grandson's life in your hands." Thomas's jaw tightened. "If you don't let me buy time, none of you will survive." Before I could answer, the basement door burst open. The beam of a flashlight stabbed the dark, sweeping across the room. Scarface stepped inside, flanked by two armed men. His scar seemed deeper in the dim light, his grin cutting across his face like a wound. "Well, well," he drawled. "The Carter family, cornered at last." His eyes fell on Daniel, then lingered on the metal in his trembling hands. "Give it here, boy," he ordered. "Hand it over, and maybe I'll let your dear grandma watch you grow up a little longer." Daniel shook his head violently, clutching the metal to his chest. "No." Scarface's grin widened. "Stubborn. Just like your grandfather." My blood turned to ice. You knew Richard? Scarface's gaze flicked to me. Knew him? I bled because of him. I lost everything because of him. That medal you're clutching. He stole what was mine and hid it in there. And now, old woman, you're going to pay his debt. Thomas stiffened, his voice cutting like steel. You're lying. Richard never stole from you. He saved lives. Hundreds. Scarface sneered. That's what they told you, isn't it? That we were the bad men and he was the hero. But tell me, Mrs. Carter, did Richard ever tell you what was on those films? I froze. My heart thundered. Blueprints. Codes. Secrets. Scarface chuckled, shaking his head. Not just secrets. Evidence. Names of men who betrayed their own country for profit. Men who made fortunes selling weapons, drugs, lives. Men like me. Men like your husband. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. No, I whispered. Richard wasn't. He wasn't like you. Scarface's grin turned vicious. Believe what you want, grandmother. But the truth doesn't care about your fairy tales. Your husband wasn't a saint. He was a thief. And those medals you cling to, they don't prove his honor. They prove his guilt. Daniel's voice broke. You're lying. Grandpa was a hero. Scarface's eyes gleamed with cruel delight. Hero? Ask her. He pointed the gun at me. Ask your grandmother what she never told you. How many nights did Richard disappear? How many times did he come home with blood on his hands and no explanation? Memories surged, Richard slipping quietly into bed, the smell of gunpowder still on his skin, the haunted look in his eyes. I had pushed those memories deep down, convincing myself they didn't mean what I feared. Scarface saw the flicker of doubt on my face, and his grin widened. You know I'm right, he purred. Before I could respond, Thomas fired. The shot cracked through the basement, splintering the wooden crate beside Scarface. Moo, Thomas shouted. I grabbed Daniel and dove behind the stack of crates as Scarface and his men fired back. Bullets tearing through wood, the sound deafening. Splinters rained down on us. Stay down, I whispered fiercely, shielding Daniel with my body. Thomas moved like a shadow, firing in controlled bursts, forcing Scarface's men into cover. The basement echoed with chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the groan of pipes as bullets ricocheted. Then a sharp click. Empty. Thomas's pistol jammed. Scarface laughed, the sound echoing like a victory bell. Out of bullets, Hale? Just like old times. He stepped forward, raising his gun, his grin hungry for blood. And then Daniel stood up. Stop, he screamed, his small body trembling but his voice raw with courage. He held the metal high, the chain dangling, the metal catching the dim light. You want this? Then take me instead. Leave my grandma alone. Daniel, I cried, my heart seizing. Scarface's grin turned slow, savoring. Ah, brave little soldier. He took a step forward, gun trained on my grandson's chest. Maybe I will. I scrambled from behind the crates, my body moving before my mind could catch up. I lunged toward Daniel, desperate to shield him. But before I could reach him, the far wall of the basement exploded. Concrete shattered, crates toppled, dust filled the air. Men in tactical gear stormed through the breach, weapons raised, shouting commands. FBI, drop your weapons. Scarface spun, snarling, his gun jerking toward them. And in that instant, everything changed. The basement was a storm of dust and noise. Shattered concrete rained from the ceiling as armed men in black tactical gear poured through the jagged hole in the wall. Their shouts filled the air, sharp commands cutting through the smoke. FBI, drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them. Scarface whirled, fury flashing in his eyes. His gun twitched between me, Daniel, and the advancing agents. For the first time, his smirk faltered. Thomas dove to cover, yanking Daniel and me behind another stack of crates. His hand pressed against my shoulder, firm and urgent. Stay down. Don't move, he hissed. Daniel's small fingers dug into my arm, trembling. Grandma, are they here to save us? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to promise that this nightmare was over, that men in uniforms meant safety. But after everything we'd seen, the betrayals, the lies, the way even the government seemed hungry for the medals, I couldn't. Don't trust anyone yet, I whispered back, my heart pounding. Not until we know for sure. Scarface raised his hand slowly, his gun dangling from one finger. His voice was slick, oily, his grin returning despite the rifles aimed at his chest. Gentlemen, he purred. You're late. I've already done half your job for you. An agent stepped forward, his vest marked with bold white letters, FBI. His voice boomed through the basement. Drop the weapon. Now. Scarface chuckled, tossing his pistol aside. It clattered across the floor, spinning before coming to rest against a crate. See, cooperative. He spread his arms wide, turning slowly. But you should know, if you're here for the medals, you're wasting your time. The boy has them. Every beam of every flashlight swung toward Daniel. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. His hand instinctively tightened around the metal, its chain digging into his palm. No, I whispered fiercely, pulling him against me. Don't you dare. One of the agents stepped closer, his rifle lowered slightly but still ready. His voice was calm, measured. Ma'am, please, give us the medal. It's evidence. It doesn't belong in civilian hands. Thomas stood slowly, placing himself between us and the agents. His pistol was gone, his hands raised, but his voice was hard. Don't listen to them. They're not here to protect you. They're here to take the films and bury the truth. That's all they've ever wanted. The lead agent's head tilted, his jaw tightening. Careful, Hale. You're walking a dangerous line. The tension snapped taut, like a rope ready to break. Daniel clutched the metal tighter, tears filling his eyes. Grandma, what do I do? I wrapped my arms around him, glaring at the men with rifles. My voice shook, but it carried the weight of years, of pain, of betrayal. You think you can point guns at a child and call yourselves the good guys? Shame on every one of you. The lead agent's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I understand you're scared, but you're in over your head. Hand it over and this ends tonight. Scarface laughed, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. Oh, I'd listen to them, grandmother. They've got itchy trigger fingers, and I'd hate to see that boy's blood on your conscience. My fury boiled over. I stood, squaring my shoulders, pushing Daniel gently behind me. My voice rang out, sharp as glass. You'll get this medal over my dead body. For a moment, silence. Even Scarface's grin faltered, just a flicker. Then the basement exploded in chaos. Scarface lunged, shoving one of the agents aside and diving for his discarded pistol. Thomas roared, tackling him before he could fire. The two men slammed into the crates, the wood splintering as they grappled. The agents shouted, guns swinging wildly, caught between enemies. Bullets cracked, ricocheting off concrete, sparks flying. Grandma, Daniel screamed. I pulled him down, shielding him with my body as the room turned into a battlefield. Shouts, shots, the crash of wood and metal. It was all a blur of noise and fear. Through the haze, I saw Thomas and Scarface locked in brutal combat. Scarface's fist slammed into Thomas's jaw, blood spraying. Thomas retaliated with a headbutt, the sound sickening. The metal slipped from Daniel's grasp in the chaos, clattering to the floor. It spun once, twice, then came to rest in the middle of the room. Every flashlight, every eye, snapped to it. Time seemed to freeze. Scarface's hand shot out, fingers brushing the chain. A shot rang out. He jerked, blood blooming across his chest. His hand fell inches short of the metal. Thomas stood above him, one of the agent's pistols in his grip, smoke curling from the barrel. His chest heaved, his face a mask of fury and pain. Scarface coughed, blood spilling over his lips. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with hatred even as the light faded from them. This isn't over, he rasped. You'll see. Richard wasn't the hero you think. And then his head fell back, his body still. Daniel whimpered, burying his face against me. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The metal lay between us all, gleaming faintly in the dust. Thomas bent, reaching for it. Stop right there, the lead agent barked, his rifle snapping up. Thomas froze, the barrel aimed squarely at his chest. The agent's voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a blade. That metal belongs to the United States government. Hand it over. Now, the surviving agents closed in, rifles trained on us. Daniel clutched my arm, his whisper barely audible. Grandma, they're just like him. What do we do? I stared at the metal, the weight of Richard's secrets pressing down on me like a mountain. The air was thick with smoke, fear, and the stench of betrayal. And in that moment, I knew, no matter who claimed to be the good guys, the only people I could trust were the ones standing at my side. I took Daniel's hand, squeezing tight. My voice was steady, even as my heart thundered. We run. And before the agents could react, I grabbed the metal and hurled it into the shadows. Flashlights swung, shouts erupted, and the room plunged back into chaos. The metal clattered across the concrete floor, skidding into the darkness beneath a broken crate. Flashlights jerked toward it, beams slicing through the dust-filled air. Shouts erupted as agents scrambled, their boots thundering across the basement. Secure it. Secure it now. Thomas lunged, but an agent blocked his path, rifle raised. Another dropped to his knees, reaching under the crate for the chain glinting in the shadows. I didn't wait to see who got it. My hand closed tight around Daniel's, and I pulled him toward the jagged hole in the wall, the breach the FBI had blown through when they stormed in. Run, Daniel. I shouted. He stumbled but kept up, his small legs pumping as adrenaline drove him forward. Bullets cracked behind us, shouts echoing, but all I heard was the pounding of our footsteps and the roar of blood in my ears. We darted through the hole into the night air. The ruined factory yard stretched before us, rusted fences, heaps of twisted metal, shadows shifting under the glow of floodlights. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Grandma, wait. Daniel gasped, tugging at me. What about Thomas? A gunshot split the air. I turned, heart seizing. Thomas stumbled through the breach, blood streaking down his arm. He clutched a pistol in one hand, his face pale but determined. Go, he barked. Don't stop. Behind him, the agents poured out, rifles raised, their flashlights sweeping the yard like hunting dogs. I yanked Daniel behind a stack of rusted drums, crouching low. My breath came in ragged gasps, but my mind raced. We couldn't outrun them forever. Not with a child. Not with armed men surrounding the yard. Thomas slid in beside us, grimacing as he pressed a hand to his wound. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and sticky. They've got us boxed in, he said hoarsely. The only way out is the river. The river. I hissed. It's half a mile away. Then we move, he said. Now, before they tighten the net. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Grandma, I'm scared. I pulled him close, pressing my forehead against his. So am I, sweetheart. But we're together. And as long as we're together, we'll make it. Thomas peered around the drums, his jaw tightening. On my signal. Stay low. The agents fanned out, their flashlights cutting across the yard. One beam passed over our hiding spot, lingering for a heartbeat too long. Now, Thomas snapped. We bolted. My legs screamed with every step, but fear drove me forward. Daniel clung to my hand, stumbling but refusing to let go. Shouts erupted behind us. There! Don't let them get away. Gunfire cracked. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal. I ducked, dragging Daniel behind a heap of old tires. My heart hammered, my breath burning. Thomas fired back. Short bursts that forced the agents to dive for cover. He was bleeding badly, his movement sluggish, but his aim was steady. Keep moving, he barked. Don't stop for me. We dashed again, weaving through the wreckage, the river's faint glimmer visible in the distance. The air smelled of oil and rust, mingling with the acrid stench of gunpowder. But the agents were closing in. Flashlights converged, their beams narrowing the gap. We were running out of time. And then, a shadow moved ahead of us. A figure stepped into our path, tall and broad, a pistol gleaming in his hand. Not an agent. Not Scarface. Another man. Another hunter. His voice was calm, almost polite. Going somewhere, Mrs. Carter? I froze, pulling Daniel behind me. My heart sank as I recognized him. I had seen his face once before, at Richard's funeral. He had stood at the back, watching silently, his expression unreadable. Who are you? I demanded. His eyes flicked to the metal, dangling from Daniel's hand again. Somehow, in the chaos, my grandson had retrieved it. Someone who's waited a very long time for that, he said simply. Thomas stumbled forward, raising his pistol. You, his voice was hoarse with rage. You were one of them. One of the men Richard exposed. The stranger's lips curved in a cold smile. Smart as ever. Hale. Too bad you won't live to tell anyone. He raised his gun. Time slowed. Daniel gasped, clutching the metal to his chest. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out the world. And then I heard Richard's voice in my memory, soft and steady. If the day ever comes when you have to choose between saving a life and saving a secret, choose the life. Always. I moved. Snatching the metal from Daniel's hands, I hurled it into the air with all my strength. It spun, glinting in the floodlights, drawing every eye. The stranger's gaze flicked up, his gun following instinctively. Thomas seized the moment. He fired. The stranger jerked, his gun clattering to the ground as he crumpled. The metal hit the earth with a faint clink, rolling into the grass. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Just the sound of my ragged breathing, Daniel's quiet sobs, and Thomas's labored gasps. Then the floodlights shifted. Agents poured into the yard, their shouts closing in. Down on the ground. Now. Thomas grabbed my arm, his grip trembling but firm. The river. Go. We ran. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the glimmer of water ahead pulled me on. Bullets sliced through the night, splashing into the dirt around us. And then we were there. The river stretched wide and dark, its current swift and merciless. I turned to Thomas. We'll drown. He shook his head. Better to take our chances here than in their cages. Daniel clung to me, his eyes wide with terror. Grandma, I can't. I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my gaze. You can. I've got you. Always. The agents burst from the shadows behind us, rifles raised. No time. Thomas shouted. He pushed us forward, and together we plunged into the icy river. The water swallowed us whole, dark and freezing, pulling us under. Daniel's grip tightened on my neck, his small body trembling. I kicked, fighting the current, desperate to keep us afloat. Shots cracked above the water, flashes lighting the night. But the river carried us, sweeping us into the darkness, away from the lights, away from the guns. We were free, or so it seemed. As the current dragged us downstream, Daniel's voice whispered in my ear, weak but fierce, Grandma. I still have it. I gasped, pulling back just enough to see his tiny hand clenched tight against his chest. And there, impossibly, was the metal. The chain was wrapped around his fingers, glinting faintly even in the dark water. Shock and dread surged through me. He hadn't let it go. Not even when I threw it. Not even when the world collapsed around us. The metal, Richard's secret, Scarface's obsession, the FBI's prize, was still with us. And in that moment, as the river swept us into the unknown, I realized the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But one thing was certain. Whatever battles lay ahead, we would face them together. Because no matter the secrets, no matter the betrayals, no matter the blood spilled over those cursed metals, Daniel was my reason to fight. And I would protect him until my last breath.